Hi, welcome back to what will be the last for now of my talks on Christian mission in the Bible. We're going into Acts chapter 10. I'd love to read the whole chapter, all 48 verses, but I'm going to stop in the middle of verse 23. At Caesarea there was a man named Cornelius, a centurion in what was known as the Italian regiment. He and all his family were devout and God-fearing. He gave generously to those in need and prayed to God regularly. One day, at about 3 p.m, he had a vision. He distinctly saw an angel of God who came to him and said, "Cornelius." Cornelius stared at him in fear. "What is it, Lord?" he asked. The angel answered, "Your prayers and gifts to the poor have come up as a memorial offering before God. Now send men to Joppa to bring back a man named Simon, who is called Peter. He is staying with Simon the tanner, whose house is by the sea." When the angel who spoke to him had gone, Cornelius called 2 of his servants and a devout soldier who was also one of his attendants. He told them everything that had happened and sent them to Joppa. About noon the following day, as they were on their journey and approaching the city, Peter went up on the roof to pray. He became hungry and wanted something to eat, and while the meal was being prepared, he fell into a trance. He saw heaven opened and something like a large sheet being let down to earth by its 4 corners. It contained all kinds of 4-footed animals as well as reptiles and birds. Then a voice told him, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." "Surely not, Lord," Peter replied. "I have never eaten anything impure or unclean." The voice spoke to him a second time. "Do not call anything impure that God has made clean." This happened 3 times, and immediately the sheet was taken back to heaven. While Peter was wondering about the meaning of the vision, the men sent by Cornelius found out where Simon's house was and stopped at the gate. They called out, asking if Simon, who was known as Peter, was staying there. While Peter was still thinking about the vision, the Spirit said to him, "Simon, 3 men are looking for you. So get up and go downstairs. Do not hesitate to go with them, for I have sent them." Peter went down and said to the men, "I'm the one you're looking for. Why have you come?" The men replied, "We have come from Cornelius the centurion. He is a righteous and God-fearing man who is respected by all the Jewish people. A holy angel told him to ask you to come to his house so that he could hear what you have to say." Then Peter invited the men into the house to be his guests. There's an old joke that takes a Bible verse about some people not dying before the second coming of Jesus and applying it as a motto for a creche or another gathering of babies. The verse says, "We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed." Change. Children change your lives like nothing else. Marriage is a big change, but having children requires far greater adjustment. We've heard a lot in the election campaign about change too. Now, with the new government in office, we're about to find out whether there will be change, and if so, what. In our reading, we meet 2 people who are on the verge of major change in their lives: Cornelius the centurion and Peter the apostle. Both are in a fairly comfortable place in their lives, but things are about to take dramatic twists for both of them as their lives are about to meet. So let's think about the two of them. First, Cornelius. To the readers of Acts, who are probably Roman, Cornelius as a centurion is an all-round good guy. Roman citizens admired their centurions, rather like the way many in our society see our soldiers as heroes. One Roman writer put it this way: they wish centurions not so much to be venturesome and daredevil as natural leaders of a steady and sedate spirit. They do not desire them so much to be men who will initiate attacks and open the battle, but men who will hold their ground when worsted and hard-pressed and be ready to die at their posts. And not only that, Cornelius would have been regarded as a good egg by the local Jews, at least as good an egg as a Gentile could be, because we read in verse 2, he and all his family were devout and God-fearing. He gave generously to those in need and prayed to God regularly. He hadn't quite gone all the way to becoming a complete Jewish convert. That would have required a painful snip for him. But in prayer and giving to the poor, he practiced 2 of the 3 basic disciplines expected of a Jew, the third being fasting. But we can't stop there. According to the angel who appears to him, even God has taken a shine to Cornelius. And so in verse 4, the angel says, your prayers and gifts to the poor have come up as a memorial offering before God. It's all good, isn't it? Admired in society, respected in the community of faith, and pleasing to God. Except God still has an agenda of change for him. That's why he needs to meet Peter and hear Peter's message. He believes in God, he does good deeds, and contributes to the well-being of society. Yet God says, Cornelius, you need more. You need change in your life. Perhaps we know similar people today. We might even be one of them ourselves. Good people. After all, the church has no monopoly on goodness. They may be people who pray or even turn up at worship sometimes, but sometimes they say, oh, I don't really need to go to church to be a good Christian. They may work hard at their job, love their families, and put in extra effort of an evening to do something positive in the local community. Perhaps they're in a profession that benefits the well-being of others. And maybe God says the same today. You need more. You need change. Specifically, I think he says something similar to what he effectively says to Cornelius. You need to meet someone who will tell you about Jesus. Because that is sorry, I just lost my track. Because that is what Peter would go on to do when they finally met. Why would we need to meet Jesus when we believe in God and do good in our community? Well, if we're serious about our belief in God and wanting to do what he likes, then we shall want to be acquainted with the one he sent to bring peace, forgiveness, and true purpose of life. That one is Jesus. If God has been quietly working in our lives, and we've been seeking to respond to him with belief and good works, then when we hear about Jesus, we'll be positive. If, on the other hand, all our talk about believing in God and being good is a smokescreen to avoid serious commitment, then the mention of Jesus will expose the truth of our hearts. Happily, Cornelius wasn't like that. He was truly interested in God and God's ways. Change would come for him. Dramatic change, but good change. Secondly, Peter. Now, to get inside Peter's attitude to life, let me ask you this question. Have you ever been concerned with the fear that bad company corrupts good character? Perhaps you've been the father of a daughter and you were bothered about what kind of boyfriends she might bring home. That's a bit of that. Can any young man be good enough for your princess? What would you have done to him if he wickedly stepped out of line by bringing her home 5 minutes later than he promised? Really, you don't want your little angel influenced by a wayward soul. Now, translate that into a religious context, and what you've got in Peter is a guy who has been brought up to believe that you shouldn't mix with the wrong sort of people, or your pure religious faith will be contaminated. And so, as a good Jew, he had believed he should have nothing to do with those who, in religious terms, were, quote, unclean. And Cornelius, despite hanging out at the synagogue, was in some sense unclean to him because he hadn't become a fully fledged Jew. Now, it has to be said, Peter isn't always consistent in his convictions here. We learn in this story that he is staying with Simon the tanner, and that is suspect behaviour for a devout Jew. A tanner in his trade deals with the skins of dead animals, and good Jews were not meant to have anything to do with dead bodies. Yet Peter accepts hospitality from such a man. Either he's compromising his convictions, or he's beginning to change before this incident. My gut feeling is it's the former, but maybe wrong. But here, everything definitely begins to change for Peter when he gets hungry at lunchtime. As he falls into a trance, he sees this strange vision of a huge sharing platter. Some of the items on the menu are foods regarded as unclean by Jews. But in the vision, he forgets that Jesus had declared all foods ritually clean. However, the call to eat ritually unclean food becomes in the vision a metaphor for mixing with people he would normally shun, Gentiles. If Peter is to live in the will of God, according to the love of God, then he has to make a drastic change to his life. He has to begin hanging out with people who are different from him. He needs to start relating to people whom he would otherwise consider anathema. What's more, he will have to do all this for the sake of sharing God's love in Jesus. You see, up to now, the followers of Jesus were effectively nothing more than a small Jewish sect. Just about everybody who had begun following the way of Jesus had been Jewish. There was the occasional exception, like the heretics in Samaria in Acts chapter 8, but the new faith really hasn't burst outside Jewish boundaries until now. The question of whether it should hasn't even been raised. But it's about to be raised. And effectively, it's God who puts it on the agenda. God calls Peter to a radical change that will take his life-transforming love in Jesus beyond the Judaism where it has begun to the rest of the world. Christianity as a world faith is about to begin in this story. And you know what? It means something similar for those of us who are church regulars too. You see, those who have heard me a lot won't be surprised to hear me say this, but it needs repeating because we must take it on board. It might feel nice and safe to draw most of our friends from the people who, like us, share the same beliefs and values. But really, that's just a way to build a spiritual ghetto. We need to make friends with people outside the church if we're going to make a missionary difference today. I hope we'll not be known as the kind of religious people who are forever looking down their noses at those whose values we query. The church is not a social club. It is a worshipping community and a base from which to launch God's mission of love for all people. If we are to see God's love spread to more people, then like Peter, we may need to embrace a radical change where we don't wait within the walls of the church building for people to come to us on our terms. Instead, we risk getting dirty in the world, showing the love of God to people. Maybe then we too shall meet the Cornelius types, people where God's already on their case and who are reaching out for him. Perhaps we can have the humble privilege of making the introductions. You know, it could even happen today if we bump into people who are reaching out for God. And so that's where I'll leave it. And for the time being, as I'm putting aside the theme of mission in these talks, I am not around next week. I have a week off. Then after that, in the rest of the summer, we'll do something a little bit different. And until then, God bless you and keep you. Bye-bye.